Welcome everyone to episode 13 of Caster Calls with ZombieGrub. This time I've got quite the celebrity appearance from the StarCraft II fans in there, just like regular esports fans, man. It's the one and only Artosis agreeing to come on and talk about casting with me. I'm really excited about this one. You're one of the guys that I definitely looked up to, still look up to for casting. So thank you so much for actually giving me some of your time, and hope everything's going all right over there.
Yeah, no, everything's fine after a bumpy start. My breaker just broke for some reason in my house, but got that under control. Thank you for inviting me on. It's my pleasure. You've been on the Pylon Show so many times for me, so this is probably going to be less than half the time it takes for one episode. And I'm sure you must have been on 10 Pylon Show episodes by now, so no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, when you put it that way, it actually does sound like a fairly equal trade.
Equal in my favor.
Yeah. But yeah, it is so cool to have you because also it feels like it's been a little while since I've had just pure StarCraft people on, believe it or not. So this would be very interesting. So yeah, we usually start off with a bit of just like your entry into casting. Now, I think everyone knows the Artosis story for the most part, how you initially wanted to be a pro gamer. You're one of the best that non-Koreans have to offer, I guess, for BroodWar. And then you went to Korea to kind of pursue that same dream and eventually got caught up in casting. How did that casting gig start?
Yeah, so it was like the way I actually ended up getting to Korea was forecasting, for a website basically that was being made. It was called scforall.com. The community member, Puerto Rican, he doesn't really do StarCraft anymore. Was running that over in Korea for the company IEG, which basically was the company that owned Eastro and the broadcasting rights. So, anyways, they saw some of my casting that I was doing, and that was kind of my into Korea. And I really, it was like my idea was when they asked me to start casting for them, I was like, you know what? I bet you I can get to Korea off this. And I was like, well, bring me to Korea and I'll cast for you. And so they did, but nothing could materialize for becoming a pro gamer. It was kind of like I had to go to the office and work and cast to be out here, and I didn't like. I was so unfathomably poor at the time that I didn't have a PC. There was a PC in the office, obviously, but I can't sit
Hmm.
there and play StarCraft while everyone's working. But yeah, I basically, after I went to Korea, I played almost no StarCraft for like the next 4 or 5 months.
Oh, wow.
So I was kind of like, it was the survival thing casting.
Yeah. What were you casting that they took notice of you?
So the way that they actually took notice was there was a tournament that I made with a really good friend that was a good StarCraft player and a Warcraft 3 pro. His ID was Gentho, for people who might remember that from way, way early in Warcraft 3 days or even StarCraft. Basically, we got together and we made a tournament called Ascension, which was like a really weird format. It was one player of each race in round robin for approximately 2 hours, and whoever had the best score at the end, I would just call it basically, or somewhere around 2 hours, it would be obvious, like, oh, this guy's up 2 points. Okay, we're giving it to him, and he advances and whatever. And it got really good reviews, which got my foot in the door to cast TSL, which was kind of my first big thing that I casted because I got eliminated kind of early from the first TSL. But it was actually the Ascension tournament that they saw where like I basically kind of put something together myself that people liked, and that's what made them think to contact me.
Mm. Yeah, I think I've heard you mention this before, maybe a Patreon question on the show or something. Like, what was casting like back then? I mean, who were you looking for to even try and what when you started casting? I mean, did you just literally just go up and be like, I'll just talk, or is there anyone
Mm.
setting the oh god, can't think of any words. Was there anyone who was leading the charge into how to cast and how to cast esports?
Yeah, so there wasn't very much casting back then, especially for StarCraft. Like Tasteless was doing a little bit here and there. Ascension I was doing in like 2007, so I think I started that probably around a similar time to when he popped over to Korea. Um, but when I started casting it, the thing is, I didn't realize that I could cast. Really, it was more of Like, oh yeah, let me do some justice to my friends, the other top level foreign players. That's what Ascension was all about, was kind of giving them a platform because I had so much deep respect for how hard they trained and how good they were. Living in such different circumstances than the Korean pro gamers in their pro houses. So I just kind of got on the mic and started talking. I've always been kind of a very opinionated, excited person about StarCraft. So I just kind of did that. I just kind of opened my mouth and started going. There wasn't really too much to look up to, and I wasn't trying to emulate anyone. I was just trying to analyze the games, and I would get excited because I was excited about the games. So that's how I started.
That's, I mean, I'm assuming that was all online, right? So you probably
Mhm.
didn't give a lot of thought about a crowd or anything like that.
Oh no, no, none whatsoever.
When you first got an event that actually had you like in studio, a production team, big or small, did you feel any nerves? Did you feel like it was any different, or it was just the same deal like you're talking about StarCraft?
um, there was only like a few times in my career where I actually felt nerves to commentate. And one of them was, I think it was maybe my second time in front of a crowd. Yeah, I believe it was my second time. So the very first time I commentated in front of a crowd was, I believe it was at the USA WCG finals in 2008. So basically, I went to Korea in the summer. I had already qualified for the USA finals. I flew back for them because they were the week before BlizzCon, if I'm recalling this correctly. They were the week, yeah, I think they were the week before, and I was going to BlizzCon as well to commentate. So I think during the final match, because I didn't make it, I sat down and commentated a little bit, but it was at like a Comic Con or something, and not many people were really watching. People were just walking around in their cosplays and stuff. So I don't even remember what that was really like. But the first time really in front of a big crowd would be at BlizzCon. So it was my, if I'm remembering this correctly, I don't think about it too often, but it was like me and Tasteless and DJ Wheat, and they were both kind of the big veterans. And then I was coming on where it was like, okay, yeah, Artosis is out in Korea. Let's get him. Let's have him do some stuff. Um, and that I was really nervous right before I went on stage. I was like, oh my God, there's like a lot of people out there at BlizzCon. This is crazy. I'm with DJ Wheat and Tasteless, who are really good commentators. I had commentated a little bit with Nick already because we both lived in Korea, so we did some joint online stuff and whatnot. But yeah, I got nervous about it. DJ Wheat had talked to me before and given me some pointers or tips or whatever. But as soon as we got on the stage, as soon as we started talking about StarCraft, it just went away because I was like, that's part of the trick to my casting is like I actually just live StarCraft, so I have confidence to talk about it. It's just kind of like, well, I mean, I am qualified to stand here and talk about this, I guess, and I'm excited about it. So it went away pretty quickly.
Did you at that time, we're talking about BroodWar BlizzCon, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
2008.
So, I mean, how big was that production? I mean, did you ever have like this feeling where you're just like, oh, there's so many other things besides talking about StarCraft that I have to worry about, that I have to consider?
Back then, no, not so much. It was like pretty straightforward and pretty easy.
Hmm.
And while I went to like some rehearsals for it and everything, I had DJ Wheat there and Tasteless there who had done this type of thing multiple times before. So I like actually just they carried me. All I had to do was analyze what was going on. So definitely that early on, I wasn't thinking about anything production wise or anything like that.
Hmm. When did production really start to like get kicked up a notch? Was it when StarCraft II came around, or was the other big
Hmm.
Brood War events?
It was definitely when StarCraft II came out. All the BroodWar casting I did beforehand was really low budget. There weren't really even streaming services. I remember we did one or two things on Justin TV way back, like right around then, but like people weren't really watching and it was hard to do and all that. And so it was really with StarCraft II coming out and GSL specifically, I guess, where production took a step up. Where I'm like, oh, this is starting to get real. Where we're actually running through a rehearsal. There's like a certain flow to the show that we have to keep and all that.
And you got immediately picked up with Tasteless, or did Tasteless put in a good word, or how did that start?
Yeah, so Tasteless was already working. Back then, GSL was owned by Gretec, which was another company, which was actually at odds with the company I worked for, IEG, because IEG controlled the broadcasting rights basically for all sorts of sports stuff out here. And they later became SPO TV for people that are confused when I say IEG, but basically they controlled like Pro League and MSL broadcasting rights. They would resell those. They were a big part of Kespa. They owned a pro team, all these things. And then Gretec came in with the what was it called? GOM TV, uh, Avertech Intel Classics, which was like a competing Star League, and that there was some drama around that out here. Like one or two of the pro teams didn't play because they were owned by companies that had counter interests. They weren't really part of Kespa and all that. So there was a little bit of weirdness between the companies, I would say. But as StarCraft II was coming up, Nick and I have been good friends for like a really long time. We've known each other since 2003. So this was 2010 when GSL was starting to get prepared for. And he was already working with them. He had done all the GOM TV stuff. So he obviously had his foot in the door. And, there's not as if there's a lot to choose from out here for casting partners back then. So, and we're already friends. We already get along. We respect each other and work well together and hang out all the time. So he basically brought me in for a meeting about GSL. He's like, "Oh, I want you guys to meet Dan. He's good. I want to do it with him." So we just kind of sat down with him. We completely bungled the whole talk, and it was kind of a disaster talking to the GSL folks for the first time. But they ended up hiring us, so there you go.
Yeah, I guess that worked out at the end. Did did you ever give any thought, especially like when you started to make more of a brand, the Tastosis brand, did you ever consider hopping back into Brood War? Was that even at all a possibility? I mean, you're talking about casting some Brood War events, but
Mm.
I mean, I know the time OGN, OSLs, MSLs, and Pro League was happening. Was there any talks to try and get casting there, or even after StarCraft II was released?
So after StarCraft II came out, not as much because stuff really took off right away. We were actually casting 6 days a week for a really long time. So that didn't happen. Before that, yeah, it was like I was trying to get Nick involved with some of the stuff that we were doing because I kind of had like all the quote unquote legitimate leagues, but it didn't really pay very well. It was much lower production value than things that they were doing at GOM TV and stuff like that. But once StarCraft II came out, it really took a lot of years for us to get back into Brood War at all.
Hmm.
Like, eventually, Afrika TV was going to start up the ASL, and so at that point, Nick had already been back playing for a bit. Like Nick has always been very diehard on Brood War, so he got very excited about that. And we started talking to them, and we actually casted like the round of four in the finals of the precursor league, the Vant Star League or whatever it was called, that some people count in with ASL stats that kind of led into the first ASL. But between that time, which was a few years ago, and GSL starting up with StarCraft 2 coming out, there really wasn't much talk or consideration about Brood War casts for us.
Was it was it just harder to break into like that top tier of the of casting, or was just like English commentators just weren't really thought of?
Yeah, well, the Korean scene is quite certain that foreigners don't watch or care about Brood War. And that we basically always get the same answer where it's like, foreigners don't really like StarCraft 1, they like StarCraft 2. And it's like, they do like StarCraft 2. You're right. They like StarCraft 2. And in fact, I think it's more popular than StarCraft 1 with the foreign scene for sure. But when we do cast it, like for instance, when we cast that Vant thing, we got like 17,000 viewers concurrently, which was equal to GSL numbers. So, as when we were putting the StarCraft 1 stuff on the same channels, because channel size is a big deal and streaming platforms a big deal for foreign viewership, it was doing well. But that's been like a theme that Nick and I just shake our heads at all the time when people tell us that the English speaking scene doesn't care about Brood War. When we know people will watch, we know people will like it.
Yeah. Although I think you'd have to admit that a lot of people watch it because you guys cast it.
I mean, we probably draw some viewership because of that. But I say that the game stands on its own merits. It's a great game, and for anyone that likes StarCraft One, I mean, it's StarCraft Two. Like, I would be so surprised if they gave StarCraft One a real shot and didn't like it. It's like I love both the games so much, and they're very different, but they're as similar. They're more similar to each other than they are to anything else. So it's just they like them both.
Oh, it's funny when you bring up Tasteless was more of a diehard BroodWar guy. I do remember one of the I don't know why. I think I was Googling something for my StarCraft history show, and I remember it's like Tasteless is one of those guys that was like, if they do multiple building selection, it's gonna ruin the game.
Hmm.
Way back on the Team Liquid forums,
Yeah.
in 2009 or whatever.
Yes. Yes. I
Um,
remember this.
how was it to go? Because there's that whole thing where like Brood War elitists exist and blah blah blah, and it's kind of make it's easy and fun to make fun of them now. But I even go back. I actually came into Brood War around 2012, so I was all retroactive. But I even go back and I watched 2010 VODs, and I'm like, wow, StarCraft 2 was not a very good game. Like that, comparable to 2010, which was really one of the heights of Brood War and what was happening over there. What was it like? I mean, did you ever just actually doubt StarCraft 2's credibility? Did you ever go like, oh man, they need to change back to Brood War? Or did you just
Mm.
have the excitement and fun of doing a new game?
Yeah, well, I think it's that last part for sure. I never doubted that StarCraft II was a great game and was going to do very well. Uh, it was so exciting at the beginning and trying to figure everything out and new stuff coming out all the time and new unit compositions and tactics and ways to play and all this. Uh, that there was really no doubt for me. I never felt like we needed to go back to Brood War. And by this time now, the game has developed and looks very different from StarCraft 1 in a lot of ways, and I think that they're two very different games, right now, and there's, like I mean, it certainly seems to me that there's room for both. Um, yeah, hope that answers it.
Yeah, it does. And as you said, like they're more akin to each other than anything else out there. When people start bringing up other RTSs that can come out, I'm just always like, dude, there's a reason like StarCraft 2, StarCraft is the most recognizable RTS. Like, as fun as it was to play Age of Empires or Age of Mythology or
Mm.
CNC or whatever we were playing back then, like, I don't know. Nothing's as like well designed and streamlined as StarCraft, but I think we're a little biased. Um,
No, but
so
we're right too. We're definitely I played the remaster of Command& and Conquer. We're correct.
yeah, it was a tough one. So when StarCraft 2 came out, I mean, how much did the scene change? You went from a lot of people who were in Brood War for a very long time to suddenly having this new possible market, especially with Twitch TV, with Justin turning over to Twitch TV. Like, did you have any plans going into StarCraft 2 about how you're going to hit target audiences, or is it really just kind of like this is my new game that I'm casting?
So, we didn't know that it was gonna blow up like it did. It was kind of like we wanted a show in Korea, Nick and I, and I'll probably say we a lot because Nick and I have worked together for so long. So a lot of, especially the early planning, while we've diverged some over the years, the early planning we did like all together. Um, so early on, it was kind of like, let's secure this Korean league for StarCraft 2. That was kind of like, let's make enough money that we can eat food and live here and figure out the next step. GSL really kind of picked up, and uh, the events overseas started picking up quite a bit. And our entire plan for the early portion, I would say, was to just cast as much as possible of the big events. So we were really interested in doing IMs, Dream Hacks, MLGs, and of course all the GSL stuff, BlizzCon, just basically anything that was top tier. That was the plan, basically. That plus we also kind of had the side thing of let's be a duo, let's cast together because Nick has a great way he puts it, where like sometimes they want to treat casters as action figures and just like be like, aha, and now Aquaman and Spider-Man are a team. And we were not as into that. We wanted to build something that we were both happy with and comfortable with and kind of support each other in that. And so that's kind of how our early planning went. It was like hit the events, cast everything we can, and stick together.
So on building that brand, I mean, once you figured out you guys could work well together, I mean, you said there was a lot of planning that you did back in the early days. Was it really just like, I mean, you or him prompting like, "Hey, let's actually make this a team." Did you require any convincing? Like, or were you just also like, "Yep, absolutely. It sounds
No,
like the best
yeah,
plan."
I'm not even sure how it exactly came up, but we were both very much on board. Again, we've known each other forever. I'm like, I think 1 year older than him or something like that, and then so we have like similar childhoods, similar experiences where we're kind of like the nerdy kid in school, and like he skateboarded and I did inline skating, and all these we played all the same games and stuff, and we have a very similar sense of humor and all these things. So we get along well together, and we live near each other, and we cast well together, and we're both really passionate about it. So I think all that just kind of fit and made it really easy for both of us to get on board with let's do this thing together. We've the thing is, while I named a lot of things that we're similar, where we have a lot of similar experiences and things, we're actually like opposites, Nick and I, to the point where this is like a really funny thing. You know those, what is it called, the Briggs Meyer tests for personality traits?
Right. Yeah.
So we took those tests, and we are literally the personalities that are supposed to marry each other. I am not even joking. Like, we are the opposite personalities that like fit perfectly together. I couldn't believe it when we took the tests and saw that. But yeah, we cover for each other's weaknesses very, very well because we're so different in our personalities, I think.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's so funny. It worked out so well, the
Yeah.
test.
Yeah.
But
Pure luck.
yeah, I think a lot of people can see that. So when you started to kind of just like realize you wanted to brand, I mean, what was the conversations like back in the early days, especially when you were being flown week after week after week? The busiest days of StarCraft. Were you actually pitching yourselves as a brand, or was it more like, "Hey, you were interested in me. You got to bring this guy"?
Yeah, so at the very, very, very beginning, uh, I would say it happened a couple times where we had to trail each other along with each other. It's only happened like more recently. It's happened a couple times. Hold on, let me just put it in order. So at the very beginning, like I mentioned, when we started with GSL, Nick just kind of dragged me into it, right? Because I didn't really. It's like this guy that does these casts for this website out here, right? There's not like they don't know me from a hole in the wall. So uh, Nick dragged me into that, and we got that going. We became a duo pretty quickly because GSL took off and people really liked it. So most events started just hiring both of us. The first BlizzCon picked me up, but that was before the GSL stuff. Yeah, that was 2008, right? So that was before GSL stuff, and then uh, it hasn't happened very often that we had to pull the other one with us. Most people want the duo. Most
Hmm.
people want Tastosis there. Uh Occasionally they'll, you know, something will happen where they want just one or something, and then maybe we'll talk to each other and be like, "Do you want me to recommend you or something?" And I'm sure it must have happened early on where we're like, "No, no, 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 you have to hire this guy too." I don't remember those instances, but it probably occurred because that was kind of early on what we were doing, where it was like, "No, we'll do everything together, and then we'll be a brand."
You said everyone was kind of like wanting both of you anyways, but did you ever consider that, being a brand ever hurt your chances at getting hired at something?
Uh, yeah, that's interesting. I think early on we got hired for basically everything that we wanted. I think we got very lucky in that regard. Um, Later on, I think at this point we kind of have this mystique about us in a certain way where I think sometimes we don't even get spoken to by certain events because they're like, "Oh, Tastosis can't afford them" or something, you know. So maybe at this point, yeah, it does impact us in a certain way. People just kind of assume they're like, "Oh, they only cast together" or something, or "Oh,
Mm.
they're too expensive" or something like that. So yeah, I'm certain that there has to be some missed opportunities in there as well.
Have you ever gotten upset with like the community having a reaction like that? Like you getting hired for DreamHack to that one host job that you got? I mean, do you ever see someone be like, "Oh, this guy's not as good as that other guy. They suck with all the other casters." Do you ever get
Oh
upset
yeah,
any of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there have certainly been, like, I've done more events than Nick overall. I'm more likely to go to an event, I guess. He
Mhm.
doesn't like to travel quite as much as I do, and I'm kind of like, I don't know. Maybe I have a little bit of FOMO or something. I love to travel and do these events and just be there and watch the new champion and all that. Um, but yeah, it can be annoying if people try to say something about one of us or the other. Like, I even when it's like, if someone's saying like, oh, I d- Artosis is great here, but Tasteless isn't, or something. Like, I don't like to read that much. It's like, well, that's my buddy, and we work together, and we've worked hard on this, and it sucks that you're saying this, but I try not to uh, take everything too seriously from that. I mean, I definitely I read criticisms and things like that, and try to gain uh, a different perspective from those to continue improving and things like that. So I guess it doesn't hurt too much as long as you take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah. I mean, you ever thought like any talent, managers or the people who choose, what who casts what? You don't think they've ever been like, oh, we have to have them, not because they want to have, the brand, but because we believe that they don't work as well with other people?
Oh, you okay? So you're talking like maybe, like, let's say DreamHack is looking to hire us, and they think that we don't cast as well with other people, that
Right.
type of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
No, I haven't really noticed that so much. In fact, there's a decent amount, because I think that if you look at the way that we cast, while people really like to see us together, I think that we do well with other people as well. And I think also Nick skews towards hosting a bit more, and we've seen him occasionally in hosting roles at events. Uh, so I think that events are open to that, and he's been asked to do it more times than he's done it. So he's definitely turned it down some, and I've turned down a few hosting roles. I think I've only hosted one event officially as like a desk host. But I've been asked multiple times, so I don't think that the events think of it like that. And I've some people have in the past been like, "Oh, I like your duo with this person or this person." These events that I've worked with, right? Like, for a long time, I was casting a lot of games with Apollo, and people thought that we were going really well together. And yeah, I think that we have some flexibility there, and I feel like I can cast with anyone personally.
I think people agree with that. Yeah, for sure. When you're probably the most successfully duoed brand probably in all of esports, I think, like, not being too biased here, but I've talked to other people from other esports, and they know the power of Tastosis. Like, do you ever, I guess, look at that and say, like, this is what should be done by everyone? Like, we proved
Mm.
how powerful a brand is, so why isn't everyone else doing this?
No, I think anyone can go about it how they like. I think that like Nick and I, there were so many things that had to go right to make this work the way that we did it. And I think people don't realize that, because I've seen other duos form, and they won't fit as well. It's like, part of the reason Nick and I fit so well together, well, like I said, our personalities just mesh well, and then we're like the same age and like the same things basically. So like, we lived near each other, and we were both in Korea, and we both played StarCraft for like 20 years. So when you put all those things together, that is a long list, and not everyone can hit that. So
Hmm.
I don't think you necessarily have to do duo stuff. I think it can be very powerful, because it has been for Nick and I. It's definitely helped our careers, and I think that we wouldn't be. I don't know exactly how things would have turned out without each other, but there's no doubt in my mind that we have helped each other on the way.
Do you think that duo casting like that, building not just a brand, but like a camaraderie or what have you with another person, is something that provides the greatest commentary? Or do you think that, like many of us, that StarCraft II commentators just being, Maynard said, swingers, just going around to everyone,
Yeah.
is actually just the best and most unique scenario, and it's actually fantastic? Like, which one's better, just always duoing or mixing it around?
I think mixing it around keeps it fresh. In fact, at a lot of events in the past 4 years or so, Nick and I will actually request, we'll be like, listen, we know you want Tastosis, and we'll cast some together, but can we mix it up a little bit as well? I think it adds freshness to the broadcast, and it actually helps us as well to cast with other people. Like, you don't want to get into a circular, some sort of loop where it's like Nick and I just continually cast together all the time, and the grass is greener over there because these guys are casting together and they're doing a good job. It's good to cast with other people and kind of feel out what that's like, and then go back and be like, oh wow, I really liked how Maynard casted this part here, and we can talk about that. Or I can be like, oh, I didn't like casting with so and so because of them talking like this, so now I suddenly appreciate Nick because he doesn't have this annoying trait or habit or something like that. So uh yeah, I think it's probably good for growth to cast with a lot of different people. But at the same time, I guess having someone that you're more normally casting with gives you some sort of baseline to measure things off of, where both you as a duo can fix yourself, and where another duo that you might be doing less often is falling short of the mark or something like that.
Do you ever see a world where when we have offline events again, that they would push more towards pairing people up? Or do you think, because it seems like the rest of esports is like more and more so catering to just immediately pairing people up and immediately building that brand, especially if they're more artificial esports. Like, do you ever see DreamHack ever being like, you know what, that's a good idea. We're always going to have 6 casters and there's going to be 3 pairs.
Hmm. Yeah, there were times where that happened, right? Like some of the early DreamHack events. Like I remember it was something like Total Biscuit and Apollo, then me and Nick, and then another duo. I can't remember who, but I know that there have been a few events that have looked like that, where it's like stuck in that way.
Hmm.
I think for StarCraft that's not going to occur, because while you might like start hiring for an event and thinking, okay, these two really work well together. Maybe these two are going to be the linchpin of the cast. They're going to do the finals or something like that. I think specifically in StarCraft II, uh, all the casters get along really well together, and there's a lot of very good pairings. And I think that that flexibility can actually make the show more fun as well. Like, you don't want stuff to get tired or boring. That's something that Nick and I work really hard on. Is we cast so much together, we try to vary what we're saying. We throw out jokes while people still think they're funny and stuff, because as soon as you start to become boring and predictable, that is really going to hurt. But when you have, if you have 6 different casters and they can all cast together in an event, how many different duos is that? That's like more duos than atoms in the universe, right? So it's
Yes. Approximately. I mean, I agree. I feel like, especially because StarCraft 2, like, we have kind of a blessing and a curse in that we're not, the favored son anymore of
Mhm,
Blizzard or even just esports. But, the blessing is that we also, we don't have to be under Blizzard's constraints anymore, for instance, with
mhm.
tournaments, but also we don't have to bow to the peer pressure that is being built up by the other mainstream tournaments, like CSGO leads the way, and then Valorant thinks they need to copy CSGO, so on and so forth. So, I mean, I've always appreciated being able to mix and match. Basically, I think it's made me a much better caster. So
Yeah,
I'm
and
in agreement.
actually, just to speak to exactly what you were just saying, from what I understand, what I've heard from people that put together a lot of these StarCraft events and have over the years, StarCraft is oftentimes looked up to from the other esports as far as building a broadcast. And that, for instance, in other games, they call a spot on the couch the in control spot. Like the people
Really?
behind the scenes, a lot of people call it that because Jeff kind of made this magical spot on the couch where, like, oh God, if you have someone that's really funny and quick witted and good at talking and knows the game, holy crap, that makes the couch 100 times better, right? So eh, StarCraft in a lot of ways has led the development of a lot of the ways that these other esports function as far as broadcasts go.
Actually, on that topic, have you ever felt that you and the Tastosis duo have like actually led the way when it comes to modern era casting and commentating? Because I know, I mean, if we go back to the early days of esports, back 2010, StarCraft 2 was one of the starting places for so many people that we now know as, big ballers in their respective games, like similar. I mean, do you ever like look back on the 10 years and be like, you know what, we kind of set the tone. We kind of were the first big commentators. We built that brand. We introduced a level of comedy to sports
Mm.
broadcasting when, regular sports broadcasting doesn't really have it? Or is that, is that too much of an ego?
It's probably too much of an ego, but yeah, I think in the beginning it was true. Like we were the two people were really watching, and everything kind of you could see what we were doing bleeding out into the development of esports in the beginning. Like for instance, we started uh we started wearing the blazers and t-shirts,
Yeah.
right? This is a very obvious example. We started that, and the reason we did that is because we had a t-shirt company that was feeding us at the time
Yeah.
called thehandsome.nerd.com. So like that literally is why we were doing that. We had to fight with the GSL producers and stuff to let us do that because we're like, no, 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 we're gonna. This is what we're wearing because we want that advertising basically. And then people started doing that, and early on there was a lot of people just trying to copy what we were doing, like the kind of joking way. And I remember a lot of people were getting flamed. They're like, "Oh, you guys are not them. Don't do that." Which I would agree with. You gotta do your own thing in casting. But yeah, early on, I think that we influenced a lot. But at this point, esports is so big, and there's so many good casters and high quality casters that I don't know how much that would still exist in this day and age.
There's certainly a lot of different formats of broadcasting as well. Things have really, branches offshoot into a million different ways of broadcasting. So you guys are really well known for being the guys who dumb StarCraft down, who can get on the final stage and actually appeal to a mass audience. So that's also one of the reasons you're picked for a lot of the finals. Did you guys intentionally decide this at any point, or is it more of a discussion with Blizzard at the BlizzCon finals, or where have you?
No, it's something that we kind of have worked on and created. This is a big part of our casting because we do a lot of different formats and a lot of different gigs. Is that we try to tailor it to what we're doing, and we take a look at like how big is this audience? Like, is it a live audience? Is it something that is going to be the first match a lot of people watch? Is it something that's going to have a lot of people from other games coming in, or is this something more hardcore? So it's actually something we have talked about immensely over the years. I mean, at this point, we've kind of mapped out the way that we cast a lot of things, so we don't have to have as long conversations anymore. Like we'll just kind of remind each other. If let's say it's a BlizzCon finals, we'll be like, all right, let's keep the hype up. Let's keep it noob friendly. People are going to be watching this. They want to see is Raynor going to win this year? That type of thing. Um, but yeah, in the past, we definitely were like, okay, this, for instance, the biggest match of the year. So on one end you have the biggest match of the year, which might be the BlizzCon finals, where you know that it's like, well, all the Counter-Strike fans are going to watch this too because it's StarCraft, and why wouldn't you watch that, right? Uh, so we're going to dumb that down and kind of make it. We're going to focus on excitement and being noob friendly, right? That would be something. I am Pyeongchang would be a good example of this, where it was like, okay, keep this really easy and simple for everybody watching because we're trying to show that StarCraft can be a good spectator sport for everyone. And then you look at some other stuff where it's like, oh, this is an online only GSL tournament that's on in the middle of the night. Okay, let's go just hardcore nerd on this one because we know only the most hardcore fans are here and they want to hear some deep analysis or something like that. Or, oh, this is the round of 32. It's a group that has Maru and TY and two newbies. Let's just make jokes, because we already know the outcome of it. It's like we're gonna have one really good match and a bunch of bops. So
Hmm.
I think that is an important skill for any casters to have is to tailor it to basically the audience that is going to be watching. There's just so many degrees, so many shades of that.
I mean, on the topic of who you're appealing to, what are your thoughts on this whole kind of issue where it's like analysis is crown number one, especially in StarCraft, as opposed to the overall product being just like a good fun show? I mean, do you think it's a lot of just like minority, loud minority,
Mhm.
being like these guys don't know what they're talking about, like what's happening? Or do you actually think that it is like the job of the caster to be so analytical?
Mm. So I think pure analysis is where games go to die. I don't think that this is so I basically if pro gamers give you the stamp of approval, it feels real good. My God, I can tell you because I've had pro gamer stamps of approval for most of my career, right? It's just and occasionally it turns the other way. If pro gamers say like, "Oh, this doesn't even know what he's talking about," that feels terrible. Um, so I think people kind of strive for that. And there was definitely a period in StarCraft II casting where everyone was just trying to show each other up on how much they knew. There was like a period where people were just quoting numbers. Like, oh, this is the 415 drop. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? That is not commentary. What are we doing here? So I think you have to be careful with how analytical you get. It's important to have a fun, enjoyable show for people. This isn't about a caster showing off how much they know. It's about conveying the information, telling a story, keeping it entertaining, keeping it fresh. And when things get really, really deeply analytical, that is when it'll start to get boring, and only the most hardcore fans are going to stick around. And the thing is, those hardcore fans are always going to stick around because they love the game. But yeah, I think that there needs to be a much bigger range than just getting as analytical as possible.
We always talk a lot about story and storytelling being actually what casting is. Do you with over in Korea or GSL or even the online stuff or the dream hacks and MLGs that used to happen, did you ever sit down with anyone, the entire group or Nick and just like brainstorm these storylines, or did you guys kind of just do everything on your own?
So Nick and I like do some. We talk together about how we're going to approach things, but we prep for events separately. So yeah, I've gone through a lot of different phases of prepping for events and for storylines in my career. Um, so the some of the things that I've done in the past, like for instance, I've gone over match histories and wrote that all down. One of my things that I really like doing for a while, like if I would be going to an IM and it has, it'll be this big set of players, some of which are much more unknown or something. I used to sit down and just write a paragraph, 4 or 5 sentences about each player. And like if you can't do that, like are you going to be able to tell the story? So then I'd find like, oh geez, the Chinese Protoss player Cloud, I can't write 4 sentences about this guy. So let me go dig and see what I can find and watch a couple of his games and have some stuff to bring up. I always felt like stuff like that could be really useful. Also, as the industry became much more professional, something that I learned personally, there was a couch segment that I did that I was really upset with. I really butchered it. It was 2017, I want to say. That was the year that uh Rogue won, right? Yeah, 2017 at BlizzCon. So it was round of 4 coming up. Special was in the round of 4. And I was over the moon because I've known Special since he was like 12 years old. I love that guy. He's a friend. I used to practice with him all the time in StarCraft 1 and stuff. I know everything about him. I was so excited that he was doing so well in this tournament. So, and everyone knows that I'm friends with him and known him forever. So they're like, Mark Wolvers was like, "Oh, Dan, yeah, you definitely go on the couch, tell some stories." And I was just hyped. And the thing is, normally at that point, it's 2017. I've been casting for so long, and I can just kind of spurt about anyone. And I was super excited. I got up on that couch segment, and I did a terrible job. I was very unhappy with how I like tried. I had a lot of ideas of what I wanted to say, and I tried to do it, and
Hmm.
it just didn't come out right. It wasn't the epic thing I was looking for. It wasn't him overcoming the adversity of coming from Mexico and playing through latency and the cultural and language barriers and moving to Korea, and there was all these things that I wanted to convey, and I really didn't do that great a job. Uh, so after that, I've kind of changed my approach a little bit, where I kind of get my thoughts together a little bit better, and you have to make sure you're not forcing anything in these situations. I know that this is getting kind of rambly, but I guess this links back to what I was saying about like writing 4 sentences about someone. Let's say that you write like 4 sentences about someone. If you want to do a good job with your commentary about this person, you have all these different storylines. You can't force everything to come out. And this is something that I've really learned and try to get better at, is sometimes I'll have great stories about a player and all these great things to say, and they just won't fit. Let them die. Let them die. It's more about making the show better. not showing off how much you know about somebody. And so, yeah, that I feel like that goes with the storytelling where it's like, don't force it. It's like you have all the prep, and sometimes you're not going to use it all, unfortunately. But just yeah, I'm rambling at this point.
Oh, it's a good thing though. Like 4 sentences is actually like a really good suggestion. Just like a mini story that you can kind of prepare. You're rambling. It actually reminded me of something that I've noticed amongst other esports, and that's there's this kind of I don't know if it's a trend or what, but and I don't know if they're trying to be smart or if they actually think they're helping the story. But anyways, whether if it's they just cast and they didn't get to fit in something that they wanted to fit in,
Mhm.
or if they're watching someone else cast and they have something to add, they tweet about it. So I've noticed that I've always been like, is that cool? Is it weird? I'll watch people who are adept at the Korean league of XYZ esport while someone else who's not does the commentary, and then they'll have like a whole tweet chain about like, well, actually, this person was doing this thing, and this thing was also, and this is also another cool story. And it's like, do you think that's beneficial? Do you think that's something that we should be using to add to story? Or do you think that a lot of it is just like trying to make yourself look smart?
That one. Yeah, this is something that I've definitely seen happen. It happened in the early years of StarCraft. I don't think it happens really anymore with StarCraft commentary. But people would like tweet out like, "No, that's not what's happening" or whatever, and it's basically trying to show off. It's all about your own ego. It's not about making the show better at all because the people sitting there on Twitter reading you contradicting the caster or adding things that they missed, is that making the show better? No, it's making it worse. You're actually eroding trust in this caster, and you're making it's like you're basically changing the storylines that they're making. You're not in charge of that broadcast. You're not in charge of that cast because you're not casting it. So they might have a different idea of the stories that they want to tell with that. And to it's like, yeah, you had all this prep stuff. Well, maybe you're on the desk and you can bring someone and be like, yeah, no, I noticed that you said this, and it made me think of this thing, and you can bring it up in a tactful way like that. But yeah, when you see something like that, that's ego at play.
I've given it some credit when it's the caster themselves after a cast, right? If they're like, oh,
Yeah,
by the way, I didn't get to fit
that's
in
totally
something.
fine. I think
Okay,
that's
yeah.
I think I've probably done things like that where I'd be like, oh god, I said this and like I forgot about this, and this is why I was stupid in the cast, guys, or something like that. That's fine if it's the caster correcting themselves, but if it's another caster doing it to that caster and just trying to show off that they're better or something, it's like, come on, that's not tasteful.
What do and you've gone through so many different, like, I feel like just metas of esports commentary, including the amount of people that may or may not have been a little scummy, we'll use that word, and the people who are really wholehearted and whatever. Do you think that we should be talking to each other more and willing to be like, hey, do you know a lot about this player? And if they say no, you can just give them information. Or do you think that just takes away too much from someone's own career, right? When they're
Mm.
trying to make it and they're trying to make the money.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't think I have like a perfect answer for that because I think that casters definitely could work together more to pool their resources and things. But the thing is, people like to have that little thing that they know that other people don't know, right? Like, for instance, Roddy knows everything about Goblin, right? And like,
Yeah.
is he going to give someone else everything about Goblin and then it's all used up and he has nothing to say? Like, well, that's not really fair to Roddy. He spent a lot of time with that guy and really looked at his games. So, yeah, that can be tough, but all the casters should be working together as a team to make a good broadcast. I think that that's really important, and I think that's why StarCraft does well is because commentators are like, as far as I know, everyone's friends, right? Like everyone likes each other and wants everyone to do a good job and all these things. So I think that that helps our scene, and StarCraft II gets called out a fair amount. I think as having good commentary. And it's like none of the people left over at this point are here for the money or anything like that. That's for sure. Everyone's here because they love the game, and everyone kind of gets along because everyone's legitimate and real. But yeah, yeah.
I think that it does work out really well. I sometimes wonder about like other esports, like Overwatch League, for instance, where it feels like they're so segmented. Like there's the duos, and then the duos show up for their cast, and then they leave. And as far as I know, it was happening even before we couldn't hang out, offline. That they would just show up and then go and leave, and very few of them would actually mix and match. And I always wondered if that would lead to some of this awkwardness. The look, we were supposed to have that, but then you guys had it, and there's no way I can contact you otherwise. So I'm gonna try and build up this narrative as well. When we talk about StarCraft, we are constantly talking to each other or on the
Yeah.
Pylon show, or we're doing streams together, or what have you. So I always felt like it was the environment kind of adds to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think the camaraderie between casters is super important. Like if you look at you've done a lot of live events now. The green room is always just everyone's joking around and having a good time, talking about games, talking about memes, what's going on in the community. Everyone's really involved, and it's rare at the end of the day, even if you don't have any broadcasts left, almost everyone stays every time, even jet lagged people. It's like, occasionally someone would be really tired, be like, oh man, I'm gonna head out for now. But for the most part, everyone hangs around, even if they're not working at the end of the day, and kind of supports each other and watches, and uh, that has to make a difference.
Hmm.
That it has to. Like, I would feel so weird if I showed up and casted three best of threes in the middle of the day and then left, and then like you and Pig casted the next three. That would be that would be so weird that I would feel awkward, where it's like, why am I not sticking around? Don't I want to hear what you guys have to say and like learn more about this and talk with you guys about the game and kind of actually have a continuous storyline going on where everyone knows what's going on and everyone's friends and having a good time? Like, don't you like StarCraft? Don't you want to stay? Don't you want to see these games? Like, otherwise, why are you here? I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Would you actually, like, if someone would be like, oh, I'm having one of my first big offline events, would would you tell them, like, go and hang out, as one of the things to, I don't know, prep for, or actually do, as opposed to just studying in their room all night?
Oh, you mean like outside of the venue, outside of the work hours?
You go out and have drinks with the rest of the guys, and go out and, yeah, have dinner with the
Yeah,
guys and stuff
yeah.
like that.
I think like at least get dinner or something. Everyone has a different level that they want to hang out at, right? Like using our late friend Jeff as an example, like Jeff would always come to dinner, maximum one beer, go back to his room and read or watch Netflix or something, right? It's just that was the way he rolled, and that's cool. It's like everyone knows that we're all friends, and it's just some people need to recharge quicker.
Hmm.
Whereas some people will stay out until it's time to go to bed and just hang out and socialize the whole time. But like I think that people should hang out with each other, get to know each other better. It's going to make your broadcasts better. If you're having these fun, friendly moments with each other the night before, the next day you're going to be looser and better with your co-casters. You hung out with them, you know them better, and you're all friendly. And I think that that helps a lot. Anytime that anything is kind of forced, like if you have never hung out in a social setting with someone, I feel like you can tell the difference in the cast because it's a little bit more professional, a little bit less friendly.
I think so. I can't remember when I did. I've ever done that. Or when I've seen someone, I've been like, I know for a fact they haven't hung out, because StarCraft has had the same commentators for so long.
Yeah.
But I would definitely agree with that. Speaking of atmosphere in the green rooms, like, do you ever do you have like an idea of what kind of energy you want to bring to not just the cast, but like the casts, the casters, like the whole shebang, the whole production? Do you ever think about the type of energy you bring? Have you ever had people who were kind of like, a little more bored, or a little just like less energy, and kind of felt brought down by that, or any of those kind of
Yeah.
situations?
Yeah, that definitely has happened. I'm trying to think of an example, but I guess even if I could think of a specific example, I probably would not name that person. But I think the energy that you have definitely affects what's going on. Like everything is actually interconnected. I don't want to sound too woo woo, but like if you're having a certain amount of fun, excited energy in the back room, that is going to show through without any question. Whereas if people are just kind of downtrodden and upset in the back room, it's going to be really hard to turn that off and have a great professional fun broadcast at that point. Like if you can't joke around with the person sitting next to you when no one's watching and then you go up and sit on a couch next to them during the broadcast, what makes you think that you're gonna have good rapport there and joke around and have a good time there? That doesn't compute in my head. Like maybe you can kind of fake it and do it, but yeah, I think it is important to have everyone kind of be in a good mood. And again, I think that a lot of my ideas about casting come back to like authenticity a lot, where it's like you should be excited and happy to be at the event, and if you aren't, why are you there? And if you are excited and happy and everything, that's, you're gonna be that way during the event and then during the broadcast, and it's gonna be great.
In those types of situations when it's not like something, totally damning, it's not like they did something totally terrible, but just a little bit of like problems here and there. Do you have a way that you like to communicate with these people to kind of help bridge these problems? Or have you ever had to?
Um, so I don't think I personally have had issues with other casters generally. Like I'm really scraping my brain, but even the more disagreeable casters I generally have gotten along with very well. But I've seen other casters have disagreements occasionally. Uh, but generally, like it would just kind of be talked out pretty quickly. Everyone's like a pretty professional and would get over something like that pretty quickly from what I've seen. I've definitely heard horror stories from other games and stuff where casters have like hated each other or something. It's like, whoa, that's I can't even imagine working with anyone that I hate. And really going through my mind of StarCraft casters, I like every single one of them. I don't know anyone that I don't like within StarCraft that I can think of off the top of my head. So I
Yeah.
guess I'm lucky like that. I haven't had to go through as much of that as maybe some other people.
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of like not liking someone, but just like being like, oh, I kind of wish that this had gone a different direction,
Hmm.
like I was really excited about this, but you didn't seem as excited about this
Oh
ZBZ,
yeah, no, that's definitely happened.
Okay.
Even between Nick and I, stuff like that has happened where we'd be like, "Ooh, you got to show more energy than that." In fact, last season in GSL, there was a day where Nick had to say to me, he was like, "Are you okay?" Like during the commercial, he's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "You have no energy today. Like you need to bring it up a bit." And I was just sat there and I was like, it's like, oh shit. Like if he's saying this, it's definitely true. And I definitely brought it up for the next part. But I think that's like that. It can be hard to take criticism about anything. That it can be hard. It can hurt your ego and stuff. And the thing is, you have to have some amount of ego, I think, to do this, to talk in front of an audience and think that you should be there and think that people should listen to you. But it's important just to swallow your pride for a moment. Be like, this person wouldn't be saying this. No one wants to have an awkward encounter, I would say, right? But it's important to be able to listen to that and fix. So, Nick, thank you for that day of GSL last season where you helped me to bring up my energy levels.
that's that's awesome. Oh, that's the communication is that nice. So when you look back at your cast, like you look at the feedback that you've gotten over these years, how much has it been just your natural, like looking over your own VODs, talking with Tasteless? Have you ever gotten any advice or feedback from an outside source that you've actually considered to be very helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. The way that I look at it, okay, so I definitely talk to co-casters and stuff like that. Sometimes I talk to pro gamers about what's going on, or they'll correct me on something that I'd be wrong about. I'd be like, "Oh, damn, thank you. I really thought it was this other way." Uh, that type of thing. But also, even from the community, while it's kind of like in vogue as a caster, to be like, "Oh, the community just doesn't know," or whatever. Or like, don't read that. Actually, read it. I read feedback. And the thing is, you should discount any singular piece of feedback, positive or negative, and look more for patterns. Uh, and that's where I gain more value. There's like my biggest points of feedback would be generally Tasteless because I cast with him the most, and then just the trends that I see with people talking about commentary, and it doesn't even have to just be mine. Even if they're talking about another caster and something that they liked or did not like, if I see myself reflected in that and be like, oh, I kind of do that too, then I'll try to take that as well. And I also kind of monitor myself during the cast, where during a cast, I'll like say something, be like, "Oh, I do not like how that came out. I do not. Oh, this piece of energy I had here was very far off," or something like that. Yeah, it's important to kind of take in information from everywhere. I think I try to take in as much information as I can, and I try to discard what is wrong and work on what is right. I guess to the best of my ability.
I like what you said about trends. That's that's how I try and look at it as well.
If enough people say it, it's like, well, eventually it becomes true, right? Like you gotta.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And even when you're like you're really sure and it still is the trend, it's like, well, different gotta find some other way to approach this.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I had something about feedback and advice. Darn it, I've forgotten. Oh, yeah, actually, no. You said that you've had to deal with that kind of on the fly. I mean, when you get these pieces of feedback, like how do you deal with that plus any of the types of times that you were talking about, like, oh, I thought that was a bad cast. Like, what do you do when you start to realize like your energy's getting lower or that your casting isn't that great? Like, is it just about
Mm.
getting the cast done and going home and taking a bath, or what is it?
Yeah, so I think it can be different things in different situations. Generally, at a live event, I'm so focused that it won't happen as often. But like, let's say the GSL cast, for instance, when Nick told me during a day last season that I didn't have the energy, it took me a moment to process because no one wants to hear that they're doing a bad job. Uh, but then I just kind of like think, what is going on in my head? Am I like distracted about something? Did something happen this morning? Did I have a fight with my wife or something? Like, what's going? Is there something that I need to address? A lot of times, what I'll do is I'll stand up. To be honest, you have more energy when you're standing. Maybe in sometimes you just have to get the ball rolling. Like for instance, that particular time, I think what I did was I stood up when we came back from commercial, when we were not on camera, and then kind of like forced a little bit more hype out of myself for a second, and then just got into the groove. Like just a moment of like being forced of like, oh, and the Reaper damaged the Ling, wow, and and then suddenly you can set that new tone for yourself. Um, yeah, I think that's generally how I'll end up dealing with it in that situation. I've probably had broadcasts where I'm like, "Oh god, I just gotta get through this," or something, but I none come to mind right now.
No super embarrassing moments you're like you realize you forced something and you regret it?
Oh, no, I've had those. Yeah, no, I've definitely bungled casts, I've bungled situations, I've said really stupid things on air before. I generally actually forget about them pretty quick. I know that it's happened because I remember the feeling more than specifically what has occurred. But there will be times where I'm like, these jokes were terrible. Why was I pushing this punchline? This was awful. What am I doing? Whoa, my analysis right there. What was I thinking? I was way off. I didn't consider the upgrades. Like, you know, uh, those they definitely happen.
Yeah, well, it's good you only feel the emotion. You don't actually think about them 10 years later while you're about to fall
Yeah.
asleep. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, you're talking about energy a lot. When was it decided? Was it ever decided that you would be more of the analyst role and Tasteless would bring the hype and be the host role?
I think it fits our personalities a lot better. Nick is a lot more social and outgoing, and I'm a lot more introverted. And I play a lot, right? Like I've always wanted to be a pro gamer. Hell, to this moment, I want to be a pro gamer. Like it's just I love to play. I love to analyze. It's just that's who I am in a lot of ways. It kind of fits for us. I think the Korean commentators realized that I was kind of more fit for that, and he was more fit on the other side, and they kind of labeled us like that. And we don't necessarily like the labels too much because I think that we both do both. But there's definitely it leans towards I do more analysis, he does more hype and hosting and things. But yeah, it fits with us very well, and it it's always been correct. Like I'm just like Nick's a very good StarCraft player, but I've generally been a higher level player, and then I play more, and I just yeah it works that way. He's a better host than me. He's very good at packaging things and it's yelling GG and things like that too.
Do you? That's kind of my second question. Is like, do you even think that these roles are necessary? Like, do you ever get frustrated when someone's like, "Well, those are two analysts. Like, there's gonna be just a boring cast."
Uh, Sometimes they can be right. Like if it's two analysts that are not going to go out of their way to make the match exciting, well, sometimes there's some charm in that too. So I don't want to go down on that, but uh, occasionally this is a really important thing where I think that Korea really perfected it quite a bit. A lot of times they'll have a really fantastic host in the middle and then a couple of analysts. And a lot of times when you have like a pro gamer, for instance, coming on a broadcast, this pro gamer is going to have zero idea about how to throw to commercial, how to intro things, how to, do all these things that move the show along. So you definitely need to be able to look at that and do that, but I think you can blend both. Like it's something I've worked really hard on over the years is to be able to hype and do play by play and host and do all those. And at this point I think I'm quite good at all those different things even though I actually prefer the analyst role, but if I'm with a certain person, I'll change it up. Like for instance, if I'm casting with Roddy, let's say, I think Roddy leans more towards analysis and less towards hosting, even though he can host. So I'll generally just take the other side. So maybe I'll do 60% host and 40% analysis, and he'll do the opposite of that, right? To kind of fit it together. Whereas if you put me with a pro gamer that doesn't really cast, like you throw Snoot up with me, I'll go 100% host and let him be 100% analysis because I know that he's going to know everything under the sun and I can enable him. People don't want to hear what I have to say about late game Zerg versus Protoss. So why don't I just switch that up and make sure that Snoot can do that? So in a situation like that, I think that those roles are really important. But I think as casters, every caster should want to be able to do both. And I think especially analytical casters should be looking to expand the range because being an analytical caster sometimes takes years and years and years and years of work. Whereas getting a little bit better at hype and a little bit better at hosting is not going to take that long. To be the best, yeah, years and years and years. But you should add to your range, I would say. And I think a lot of people have at this point. So the roles don't make as much sense as maybe they once did, but they're still important to have sometimes.
I absolutely agree. Do you ever look into do you want to look into technical lessons about, how to be on camera and how to use your voice?
Yeah, I haven't as much like technical lessons. People like recommended me a couple books. I read a little bit. It was like really boring, and I don't know. Reading is like one of my passions. So when I find a boring book, it drops out of my hands pretty quickly. Um, it, I've watched. I remember in the beginning, I was watching a lot of like Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart, uh, just to see how they acted on camera and stuff to kind of reel myself in. You don't want to be like a caster that gesticulates too heavily or is looking in the wrong places. So I haven't really done professional stuff, but it's something I'm hyper vigilant about when I'm watching broadcasts and when I'm on the camera. Uh, for those specific things for like on camera presence. But as far as something like voice, I've learned like a few tricks over the years, how to make it so my voice. There was definitely times in the past where I blew out my voice, so now I know a little bit better how to breathe. I probably should have spent more time on that. I know about how to get my voice to do different things without hurting it through trial and error quite a bit. It probably would have been smart for me to do a little bit more professional looking into that, but I think a lot of it was trial and error and just tips from other broadcasters.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you ever gotten any like feedback on your voice? I mean, how frustrating is it to get the your voice doesn't sound good? Have you ever
Uh,
gotten that feedback?
I don't think I've gotten too much feedback on my voice. Like, I mean, obviously, I hate my voice when I have to listen to myself in a broadcast. I'm like, oh, they pay me to do this. I can't believe it. But I guess my voice does all right overall. And I'm very aware at this point what my range is and what I can do because there have been times where I've been trying to be epic and my voice will crack or something. I'm like, oh, that's outside of the range of what I'm capable of doing. So I avoid those situations like the plague. Those situations where I'm like, it's a coin flip if I get this this yell out. I'm like, oh, let me give it to my co-caster for that, hopefully.
Love it. Yeah, yeah. Did you ever like when you're talking about like you realize you wanted to become, have more flexibility? What were some of the growing pains of learning how to be a play-by-play caster or learning how to host?
Uh, well, okay, so I guess the growing pains were when I would do certain aspects of it, the show wouldn't be as good. Uh, and I think that that's still true a little bit, but it's not nearly as noticeable. There were times in the past where I took like a GG because it was kind of in my, occasionally it just
Pacing,
times
yeah.
out and you're like, oh, I'm the one that's saying GG here, or I'm the one who's saying the announcement. And it'll be a best of 7 at the BlizzCon finals or something, and I'll have one of the 7 GGs, and I'll be like, yeah, it's not as good. It's not, so there's growing pain in that. I think I've become better at it, and it's not as bad. Yeah, but certainly I don't like making a show worse to get better or to practice something. So yeah, I don't know. It's not a great answer, but that's just kind of how I go about things, I guess. I go over things in my mind. I do practice a little bit. A lot of times I'll be in the shower going through a certain play-by-play moment or something. Like that's something that I'll do where I'll like have this moment and I'll be like, how do I talk about this Marine split here or something?
Mhm.
I don't do it as much anymore because I have so much experience in these games. But like if I think about casting something else, more recently, like for instance, uh, I'll practice commentating over a certain stretch of a game for certain play-by-play moments. I think the last time I did that might have been I casted like one day of a few hours of Tekken at some weird event in Korea once, and I had never done Tekken before, and I'm like, okay, how do I properly play by play this so I don't just stumble over my words about these guys beating the crap out of each other, right? And so, yeah, I didn't do that great job, but
Sounds like repetition. Nate was saying like I found it funny but also helpful when he was, getting used to hosting that he would just say the same phrase that he wanted to use, over and over and over again while he brushed his teeth and in the shower and all that. So it sounds like it's one of the best ways to actually go about it, especially for the hosts thing. Like, I know when we use the term host a little bit more flexible, I think. Sometimes you use host when you mean the guy who's leading, right? When people hear host, they think desk host or stage host.
yeah, yeah. There's 3 different types of hosting. The host that's the caster that runs everything. Yeah, the desk host that runs the desk, and then the stage host who hosts the show. So yeah, maybe our vocabulary is insufficient.
Maybe a little, but yeah, I think it does help. Like, I think if you learn to be more of the leader of the duo, then it does kind of bleed over into learning how to be the host and, probably vice versa as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So definitely, definitely. So on to some like really broad topics here. When you look at current StarCraft II casting, is there anything you look at and you're just like, we need to really push this? Production needs to push this so the casting can be better like this.
Let me think about that for a moment. I think that StarCraft II casts are very, very good. Uh, I think that we go a little bit analysis heavy sometimes, which like it's good to have really good analysis, but I think there needs to be, the hype is a really important part of this. Uh, as far as like production goes, I think it's mostly on an event by event basis. Like, for instance, at this last BlizzCon, they didn't give us enough time on the desk because we were packing it all into one day, right? So maybe that's an unavoidable thing, but it hurt in us helping to develop storylines in that way. So that was a little bit painful. Um, One thing that's kind of been up and down a little bit is the intro of the players, and people have gone back and forth on this, like should you be introing the players at the beginning of every single game? That's kind of like an interesting question that I think could be fleshed out more and dealt with a bit better. uh Yeah, I think that there's always areas for improvement, really. Like I find it interesting to see what people do in the early game when it's something everyone has seen a million times. It's like, yes, I know there's going to be two orangelings and two yellowlings when the queen pops out and the reaper's going to turn around. And it's like, what do you do up to that point where the game starts to get interesting? And I mean, that's something Nick and I continue to play around with, and I think everyone does. And uh, can definitely still be improved. There's still a lot of room for improvement everywhere, I would say.
When you look at StarCraft II casters or otherwise, or other esports, what makes a good caster in your mind? When do you watch a caster, listen to a caster, and say that guy's actually really good?
I think it has to do with like the overall feelings of comfort from someone. So I think that you need to be comfortable with your co-caster. If two casters are not working well together, then that's a mistake. Like, and they're both screwing up. It's not just one person's fault because you can always bend yourself to fit with another caster, no matter how they're casting. There is always the possibility for you to become the yin to their yang. So I think that when people work really well together, that is a big plus towards being a good caster. I think having and working with your co-caster, I think you have to uh, kind of be on the same page, be building the same story. If one of you is trying to build a story, and this will happen to everyone, where you'll have two different ideas of how to present a player. It's happened to Nick and I plenty of times where it's like I'll be wanting to present this is a macro god, and he'll be wanting to present some other aspect, and it's like, oh, that doesn't fit. We're not telling a cohesive story. This is not as good as it could be. Um, so yeah, I think working together with your co-caster is really important. I think it's important to be able to do play-by-play well. It's important to be able to know what's going on in the game. I think transitions are important, and I think having a range within the game as well. I think StarCraft is. I don't know about every single game, but I know in StarCraft you need to be able to go up and down in excitement throughout a game. You need to be able to build up into excitement, and then when the excitement dies off, bring the people watching down with you uh into, like, the first push is done and everything kind of died. You're like, all right, it's resetting, right? Like, let's talk about that, and to basically to change like the cadence of the cast mid cast when you need to, and then to bring it back up. I think all those things are like really important. Also, like we talked about before, not forcing things. If you're forcing, if you're like just trying to make it so that you're showing off how smart you are or something. That really turns me off when I'm watching a caster and I can tell that they're trying to like just tell everything that they know. Or like if you're not leaving anything for a co-caster, this doesn't happen anymore, but this used to happen at the very beginning of StarCraft II. You have two casters sitting next to each other. One will say everything that's going on, and they won't stop till it's done. And then they pass to the other caster, and it's like, what is your co-caster supposed to say here? You already said everything. Are they supposed to just nod and look at you? Like, what? So there has to be some give and take there as well, where you're not trying to hog everything. You're not trying to look smart. It's about making the show good. I don't know. That's a short list. I could go on for decades about the various things that I think casters should be doing.
It sounds like when you enter into a tournament or a cast, like it sounds like your number one priority is making the production good, right? Like the cast is good overall. That'd be incorrect in saying that that's your number one goal.
No, that is the goal. Like, you're trying to make the show good. This is your job. You are a professional broadcaster. You are here to make the show good, and whatever that means. It's something that I always talk about with whoever is hiring me, whoever's kind of in charge of the show. What type of show are we looking at here, right? Like, are we? Some of them go without saying, right? A WCS circus stop. Everyone already kind of knows, but you should be communicating with whoever's kind of hiring you, with the other casters, and trying to make this show as good as possible. And the thing is, if you make it as good as possible, people think sometimes that making themselves look as good as possible is what they should do. That is only going to fool the dumbest fans. If you make the show as good as possible, that's gonna show the people who are actually hiring you. That's going to show your coworkers and all this. It's going to build respect for you. It's going to get you rehired, and that's why we're here. We're here to make a good show. We want for the game to be big and for people to enjoy it, and that's how you do it.
So for the overall, just like talking about hirings here, like what would you say to basically the casters that we have right now, and maybe some of the casters that might be up and coming, like Creighton Olsen or someone like that, when it comes to trying to prove that they deserve more gigs, what should they be looking for, especially when we're talking about StarCraft II, which doesn't necessarily have a lot of quantity of
Hmm.
gigs?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. I get asked stuff like that a lot, like how do I break in? And I can kind of only give half answers because I was there at the beginning. So there was really the break in was convincing someone to let me cast. And then I was one of the only casters and I got hired a bunch and got a lot of experience and everything kind of snowballs, right? So I'm kind of been in a very different position from people who are trying to work their way up right now. But yeah, I mean, like for instance, I think Creighton is a great example. I think Creighton is a very good caster already. But what can he do to kind of get more on the radar to get hired for these gigs? That is well, right now, if you look at him, he's casting so much, so many different events. Wardy is another person like this. Wardy gets live gigs sometimes, but casting so much online, and it's uh, it's hard to say exactly what is going to get these people hired. But I think that you got to really take everything into your own control. They're casting a lot already, but you should be talking to event organizers and seeing if you can do anything there. I think it would probably be good as well. A lot of people that solo cast have a hard time switching over to duo casts. This is something I've seen over the years. I don't know about anyone specifically right now within the scene, but solo casting and duo casting is very, very, very different. So it might be good to try to do some online duo casting with people and really kind of make something that people are going to notice. Like if people are talking, they're going, "Oh wow, that Creighton Wardy combo was sick last night," right? That can be helpful as well. Um, but yeah, I think I can't give a perfect analysis of this because of the way that I started. Breaking in is not something I know about, I guess, as much.
What about even like the amongst the people who already like get jobs, right? Like if Pig was like, look, I wanted to get more jobs, or if I, was like, look, I want to get more jobs, which totally selfish question. Would you have any advice for us? Someone who's like in it, but how do you continue building your brand? How do you
Hmm.
continue presenting to the people who are hiring that you should be hired for the next event?
Yeah. Okay, so I think that obviously the first thing is kicking ass when you do get an event. You got to do a great job with your actual work. That is important. But there's actually all these other steps that I've noticed over the years, and I've worked in actually quite a few different games. And I've done, I did a lot of Hearthstone casting, a lot of Heroes casting, obviously a ton of StarCraft 1 and 2 casting, and some other casting out there as well. But something that I've noticed that is lacking overall across everyone everywhere. Well, not everyone. Obviously, there's people that just do phenomenally the whole time, but how you conduct yourself with the people who have hired you, for instance, are you on top of talking with them? This is actually a very important thing that I see a lot of people not do, where they're like, "Yeah, I'm hired at an event. I know how to do events. We're good to go." It's like, are you good to go? Like, shouldn't you be talking to the director of the operations? I mean, when Mark Olberts was running all the events, I would be talking to him nonstop about what are the visions, what are we going for, what do you think about this, what do you think about that, bringing in my own ideas. Right? It's like I think that people should be trying their best to make the show better, trying their best to make the show what the people who have hired you want it to be as well. And the thing is, take everything seriously. This is a profession. The amount of people that goof off during a rehearsal, for instance, in esports is crazy. It's because it's like, yeah, you've done a lot of events, but why are you goofing off? Take this seriously. This isn't just for you. This is for everyone. We're making sure that this show is smooth. Is there something weird going on? Ask a question about it. This shows that you're paying attention, right? These are all important aspects that I think that people overlook. It's like it's being professional.
It sounds like you're all like, don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know when I have a camaraderie with someone or rapport with someone, it's nice when I get to be active in the production, but it can be hard to do that. So otherwise, I feel like coming into this well-established scene, that being a yes man or a yes woman is the safest thing to do. being like, they're like, hey, we're thinking of doing a trio cast. And you just go, internally, you're like, well, there's a lot of problems with that, but I'm not going to say anything. So you just go, yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to be the nicest person possible, right? But it sounds like you're saying that, like, you should actually be kind of careful about that. You should always be, putting yourself in a position that says, like, look, I think I know what can make a good broadcast, so I'm not fighting you, but I want to help. I don't want to just be someone who goes, yes, sir, and leaves.
Yeah. If you're not comfortable with a situation, if, for instance, that's a great thing to bring up a trio cast, right? If you don't feel like you can do a great job on that, I think it's better to let them know, be like, listen, I don't think that's going to work. Like, who's the host? We've never done this before. All these different things. I've done a few trio casts. We did one at a BlizzCon finals in like 2014. Damn, that's hard. Oh my god, that is not something that I'm really interested in doing. Maybe if I was in the right mood, I would agree to do it again. But like, it's difficult. Uh, and the thing is, I do understand what you're saying though, like where you feel like you've got to kind of be agreeable. The thing is, you don't want to be disagreeable. What you want to do is be helpful and agreeable, but also real, I guess. And it's a hard thing to like. I want to do everything that the people who hire me want me to do, but if there's something that I'm like, oh, that's gonna make everything look bad, I will let them know. And definitely Tasos is really good at that. This is one of the strengths that he has that's better than mine. I'm more likely to be like, oh, let's go with the flow, I guess. Whereas Tasos will be like, oh, hold the phone. This is stupid. Like, we can't. No, this can't be done. We cannot do this. This will look bad. Uh, so yeah, I think it can be very difficult to kind of get outside of your shell and make it known that about something like that. So I get what you're saying. It's a difficult situation. I guess you probably have to play it by ear and try to figure out what is best for me here. But I think that if you're working with real professionals that are kind of open-minded and really do want to put on a great show, and you're helping with that by telling them what you think is going to work and what you think is not going to work, if they don't respect that and they don't value that, then that's their loss. They're actually screwing up and making a worse show.
Yeah, I guess it has a little bit to do with also learning how to be professional. We say that and we mean, like, don't be goofing off and stuff. But even, and this is going to sound really corporate talk, but even knowing how to write like the correct sentence, when we're doing all this online stuff, usually communicating online, but not just being like, what's up? I think this is going to look really bad. Get back to me. It's peace. Like, that's not maybe
Yeah.
the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, also bringing in that professional air of like, look, I'm not
Absolutely.
disagreeing. I'll absolutely do it. But yeah, but I still think it is one of those things that probably gets more comfortable the more clout you probably have. So
Yeah, no question about that. I come from a very privileged position with that, where it's like I'm Artosis, so I guess if I bring up something that I think is bad or wrong, even if they all disagree with me and we still do it, it's not like they're like, oh, that Artosis guy. He's been working here a long time, but now it's time to get rid of him. That's not the way it goes for me. I guess I'm lucky in this regard.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's it for my questions, my personal questions, anyways. Although I have plenty more. I know it's getting kind of late, so we're gonna end on a Patreon question from Axlav,
All
actually.
right.
Yeah. So
Thanks, I like that guy.
yeah, a lot of people seem to. Every time I bring him up, they're always like, "Yeah, I love that guy." So his question was, he just actually put this, but I think I know what he means. What do you prefer, the BWC, the WCS, or the EPT systems?
Oh, all right. So the greatest thing ever was 2012 with the right, and that was the BWC, right, where it
Really?
was like
Okay.
every country kind of had its own tournament and stuff, and that was epic and that was awesome, but it cost like $1 million billion. The more recent WCS tours, they were very good. I think they were very good in really a lot of ways, and they really helped to kind of grow the European and American talent. EPT system, we just don't know yet. I think that it has really high potential, especially because Apollo is so involved. Apollo really knows what he's doing and really likes StarCraft and has all the experience. So I think for the longevity of StarCraft, this is the best possible thing that can occur. I don't think it's necessarily better than WCS or BWC forecasters, which this podcast is about. Uh, but I think overall for StarCraft, it's really good. But I do miss the like 2012 way where we had all the different countries, and that was kind of exciting, and finding out the best from every single region, putting them together. It felt more like the old days of WCG or something like that. So
Hmm.
yeah, I guess I have nostalgia for that, but it's probably just nostalgia shaped glasses.
I do wonder because I'm thinking I did not expect that answer personally, but I'm also thinking back to that was unfortunately kind of the height of Broodlord Infestor,
Yeah.
and
I'm
it's
trying
one
to
of the
take that out of my mind is what the metagame was at each point. Because it's
yeah,
like the WCS events, it's like, yeah, we had a lot of ZV and Z in there, didn't we? But I'm trying not to think of that specifically and more of the format.
that's very true. One of my like conspiracy quote unquote theories is that the reason that there's a lot of good European Zergs is because Broodlord Infestor was paired up with the BWC system, which highlighted a lot of individual regions in Europe.
Hmm.
One day I'm gonna write an essay.
I
It's
like
gonna
the
happen.
idea.
Anyways, that's all for now. This was really fantastic. I learned a lot. So thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure.
I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you'll be back for episode 14. See you guys.